Remember the first time?
Do you remember the first time you played a round of golf and kept score?
Then the satisfaction of submitting your score.
And then doing it again and again.
Eventually turning in enough scores to get your handicap.
I remember those feelings.
And the excitement of seeing that number next to my name.
Wow, was that a great feeling.
Denise, what'd you get?
I had a card.
Nice.
Whether you play all the time,
just a weekend golfer,
or even someone new to the game.
Everyone who plays can establish a handicap.
And realize the same benefits.
Tracking their progress.
Sharing a fair game with family and friends.
And most of all, having fun.
At four net 3.
And now we want to make all those things easier
and more accessible for everyone.
With the World Handicap System.
The World Handicap System.
Golf has been evolving and modernizing.
And now the major handicap systems in the world
are coming together
into one unified system.
No matter your skill level
and wherever you play.
The system has been designed for all golfers
by providing a consistent measure of your ability.
And to encourage everyone to get a handicap.
Regardless of ability,
age, gender,
or nationality.
We all have a part to play in making this a success.
So let's get ready for it.
By learning what the new system is all about.
Get out there, have some fun.
Play with the family, your friends.
Or anyone that wants to have a game. And make sure when you finish playing,
post your scores.
It's meant to be inspirational. Certainly it is for those who probably are not as, don't have as many miles underneath them as far as golf community is concerned. But that's definitely one of the PSAs that you'll start to see, and if you haven't seen it, it will start to be more so. So essentially there were 6 systems. I think a lot of you have probably seen this slide, and now they're essentially all into one system. Some of them are being implemented on a different time period, just based on what those particular communities can do. But think about it from a governance standpoint. Right now, the R&A are essentially, they handle the rules of golf, rules of amateur status, and the equipment rules. So World Handicapping System now falls underneath that. Before, the R&A had nothing to do with handicapping at all. Each AGA or part of the world developed their own system. All right. From a hierarchy standpoint, the R&A and the USGA essentially put all the dynamics together as far as the World Handicap System. And then it flows down to a national organization. In our world, in the United States, it's going to be in the USGA. But in Mexico, it's going to be Golf Federation of Mexico. Then it comes down to the AGA level, us in the Miami Valley, and then Toledo District to our north. And then it goes down to the club and the handicap committee, and then it gets ultimately down to the golfer. So that's how all this kind of stuff works. Not this dissimilar from the rules of golf or anything else. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the fundamentals of handicapping. All right, you're going to see a lot of things that you're comfortable and familiar with, but then there's going to be some about faces in some respects. So the purpose of the World Handicap System, obviously, obtain and maintain a handicap index. Now, instead of just being able to play in the United States, you can play anywhere with it. And again, recreational. And I guess that's the snapshot as to why. So here are some key definitions. Now, essentially, all of these are new. All right? So low handicap index. The low handicap index is achieved by a player within the last 12 months. Okay? So that's something that's going to be used for an additional calculation down the path. A hard and a soft cap is the reduction or limit of the increase of a player's handicap index over a rolling 12-month period, measured against the player's low handicap index within that period of time. So basically, think about Rule 10.3 that we currently do, where a tournament score can come back and bite you 4 months, 5 months after you had that tournament score because you start to play poorer. Tournament scores probably had too much of an arbitrary use throughout all of our systems. So now, consequently, we're taking all scores into account, not just tournament scores, and we're building in these hard and soft caps. So that's different, all right? So you're not going to have that conversation so much with the R. Playing conditions calculations. You're going to get some questions about this. We really don't know what it's going to look like in play. Clearly, they've done a lot of studies on this. So a procedure used to evaluate if the course and or weather conditions on the day of play deviate from normal playing conditions to the extent that they have significant impact on players' performance. I've got slides as we get a little deeper in that kind of take a deeper dive as to how that's calculated. But again, these are things that people may or may not care about because it's kind of going to be in the back side of this. But it is something that they're going to see. Exceptional score reduction. A score differential, which is at least 7 strokes better than the player's handicap index at the same time the round was played. So we've got a hard cap and a soft cap, and then we're going to have an exceptional score reduction for those that don't fall into this category. So this is the person who goes and shoots a net 59, you know, in a stroke play event. Net double bogey is the maximum score for a hole for handicap purposes, which is the sum of the par for the hole, any handicap strokes applied on that hole, and the addition of 2 strokes. So equitable stroke control, having an 8 for, what was that, 10 to 19, that goes away, all right? Net double bogey is now equitable stroke control. And it has a little bit bigger impact than it did in the past. And I'll explain that here in just a second. And then net par is a new term for par plus whatever that stroke would be for the hole. Net par is a new term for par plus used when a hole is not played. So after hole 15, if you would get a pop on that hole, instead of being a par 4, you would have a 5. That doesn't change. Terminology changes a little bit. So basically, the course rating system is now being implemented throughout the United States or throughout the world. It basically had been to a great degree before, but it's been updated to reflect some terminology and changes, but course rating essentially remains the same. So Doug and his committee and Todd and Marianne and their committees basically are going to essentially do the same thing with some adjustments. Not a great deal of adjustments, we hope. There's certainly 4 pages of changes, but it's more terminology. Minimum scores to obtain a handicap index. It's 54 holes now, and it can be made up of any combination. It used to be 5 18-hole rounds. All right, so we can get there a little quicker. No time limit on completing the submission of these scores, so they can stay on the record for years. Now you're going to see this more, that there's a recommendation that initial scores are submitted hole by hole to better assess the potential of the player. So as the World Handicap System has evolved, realize data has evolved with that. So there's going to be a big push to have all scores entered hole by hole. The new app has that, it defaults to that. The new score posting screen defaults to it. Now that doesn't mean that you can't hit a button up in the corner to post that score. So it's not going to be that much clunkier. But realize we want to capture that kind of data, because as we start to look at what a round of golf might be in the future, a 6-hole round may need some sort of course rating so that they can play equal and equitable throughout the world. So we need to start getting that data together, and the USGA has been building that back door or backroom information this whole process. Okay, maximum handicap index is 54.0. That clearly goes up almost 18 for guys and 14 for ladies. Okay, so essentially the course handicap now incorporates 3-5 to a certain extent, playing from different tees. That was always a difficult conversation, right? How do you explain that? So now the course handicap is going to have that. And the course handicap is handicap index times slope rating divided by 113 plus the course rating minus par. First time you're ever going to see par in a course rating component. Part of the reason you're bringing scorecards today. You're going to have to make a decision as we get into the next season about what you're going to want to do there. Let me give you an example. So this is from our SOPGA meeting a few weeks ago. If the person is a 13.5 handicap index, and they're playing NCR on the south course, black, blue, green, and combo, Right now, there is, if you're playing the black tees, which is the furthest back tees on the golf course, that person would be a 17. Right? With the new calculation, that person goes to a 20, building essentially in that 3-5 to some extent. And technically, I mean, there's more levels to just saying they're building 3-5 into this, but from what I'm going to tell people and what you're going to tell people is 3-5 goes away. It's part of the course handicap now. All right? The blue, which was a 17, is now an 18. The 16 basically is a 17. And a 16 from the green goes to 16. So there's a little bit more volatility in that final number. Okay, now realize this calculation didn't have the bonus of excellence. So now we're going to start talking about playing handicap, which frankly is going to be a little bit more burdensome than what our current system is like. So the playing handicap is essentially the course handicap times the handicap allowance. And if there's any difference in par, that would be essentially part of that. If different tees are in use, a player's playing handicap is adjusted by the difference of par. And again, so 15 times 85% gets you down to a 13, and all the rounding is 0.5. Now granted, if you know your systems as far as Golf Genius and the new gen product, you're going to see a lot of these things be done automatically. But if you don't understand it yourself, it's hard to educate others. So that's kind of why we're here today. There is a plethora of recommendations for handicap allowances now, okay? So all of these are going to need to be built into your tournament program when it comes time to have those first events. But now you're starting to see recommendations for scrambles. And Marion and Todd, correct me if I'm wrong, I've never seen those recommendations before, you know? And that's, again, another example of us trying to get to a point where we have more forms of play that give you an opportunity to have a backstop if you want it. So your single stroke play, Stableford or whatever, is 95%. So it used to be you would just go play. If you're playing from the same tee, you'd go play. Now it's 95%. 4-ball stroke play, all right, that's your better balls. It's 85%. I think it was 92% last year. I'm not positive. That sound right? 92% for 4? Yeah, okay. But I think the recommendation was 92%. All right, max score for handicap purposes. Kind of talked about that a little bit already, but a player's maximum score for handicap purposes, ensuring bad holes don't impact a player's handicap too severely. So an 8's a max for course handicap of 15.6, and I think I've got a little breakdown here. So net double bogey is equal to par plus 2 plus handicap strokes received or given on that hole. All right. So on a par 4, here's all the dynamics. They get 2 strokes already because of the double bogey component. If they receive a stroke, then their max score is 7. Again, another reason to enter hole-by-hole scores for the consumer, for the golfer. All right. Another reason handicap hole allocations, which are now stroke index allocations, are going to become a little bit more critical. All right, so for holes not played, this doesn't change. All right, 7 or more, but fewer than 18 are 9-hole scores. And once you've played 14 or more, you have an 18-hole score. Very similar. I don't think it changed at all. Okay, time frame for submitting scores. Because we have the playing conditions calculation change into this into the differential for that day, we ask that everybody post scores by midnight, whatever your local time is, so that a playing conditions calculation can be built in to that differential for that round for that day. All right, so ideally you get those posted each night. Now realize that, well, we're not there yet, but the index is going to update every day. When I get to the playing conditions calculation, there's going to be a question about, well, what happens if I didn't post that day? What's it come back and look like? And I'll get to that in a second. Okay, so into the actual handicap formula itself. Okay, there are 5 significant changes to the handicap calculation. Minimum scores, obviously, we already talked about that. That's 3 now, 54 holes, any way we get there. The number of differentials changes from 10, Kurt, to 8. So that reduces that just a little bit as well. Playing conditions calculation, an exceptional score reductions that considers all scores. And then there's a soft cap and a hard cap on those score dynamics based on what your 12-month cycle looks like. Okay, so now the numbers of differentials used. Clearly it used to be 5 to start, you know, as far as lowest, whatever. Now we're actually doing an adjustment. So we start with 3 scores, and there's an adjustment to the actual differential based on that first score that's being used of those 3. Used to not be there at all. Now it's there. It's obviously all in the system. All right, so for an 18-hole score differential, it's calculated 113 divided by slope times adjusted gross score minus course rating minus the playing conditions calculation adjustment. All right. All right, so we're talking about 8 of the last 20 now as far as the handicap index itself is concerned. All right, playing conditions calculations. So maybe to your point, when adverse weather conditions or abnormal course setup causes courses to be unusually high or low on a given day, a playing conditions calculation will adjust score differentials to better reflect the player's actual performance. So it goes from saying the golf course played easier, only one, because if you think about it, it's really hard to set up a golf course to play easier. You can. PGA playability test is supposed to, but you know, depending, middle of the greens aren't always easier. So, but we also know that you're playing in 40-mile-an-hour winds from a lot of hole locations, all those kind of things. It can be very difficult. So each night at midnight, if there's 8 scores posted at your facility, the system will run this calculation and determine if there is a playing conditions calculation adjustment that needs to be put into the score differential for that day. Automatically happens. You're clearly going to have more of this in the spring and fall. I mean, those kind of things happen all the time in the spring and the fall. But you got to get 8 scores.
So it's based on how other people play that day?
That's correct. Okay. So you have to have, in some courses, it's going to be hard to have 8 scores turned in a particular day. So basically what we're talking about here, if the calculated score differential, once the score is posted and the playing conditions calculation is applied, if that's appropriate, you calculate a new handicap index. If that scores differential is 7 strokes or better than the handicap index from when the round was played, they'll apply an ESR table reduction to the new handicap index. So there's a 1 adjustment and a 2 adjustment. All right. So this is in addition to any reduction caused by the score being used in the updated 8 of 20. Okay, so now we have a memory of the low handicap index. The low handicap index represents the demonstrated ability of a player over a 12-month period preceding the most recent score in the player's scoring record and provides a reference point against which the current handicap index can be compared. All right, so here are how the cap procedures work. A soft cap and a hard cap will be implemented to limit the extreme upward movement of the player's handicap index within a 12-month period. All right, the soft cap will suppress upward movement by 50% after 3.0 stroke increase over the low handicap index has been reached. So this is at 50%. Okay? Now, the hard cap will restrict their upward motion to 0.5 or to 5 strokes. So the most you're ever going to change over a 12-month rolling calendar is you're going to go up 5. Period. Period. Bill.
Is there any kind of like medical exemption?
Sure. Absolutely, and that's exactly where the handicap committee comes in. Okay, so the soft cap and hard cap procedures only start to take offense once the player has 20 acceptable scores. Kind of makes sense. All right, daily revisions. We want them posted by the end of each day. Players submit their scores as soon as possible after the round completed and before midnight. This to ensure the calculation makes sense. And obviously, a player's handicap index can also be revised by committee adjustment. So one of the things that we didn't talk about was, let's say that you had a playing condition calculation on whoever put scores in a particular day. Well, they forgot to put their score in And so a day later, they'll put it in, or 2 days later. They won't redo the playing conditions calculation for everyone, but that condition calculation will be added to that score that's posted on the correct date, even though it was posted later. So it can't help determine what that playing conditions calculation is, but it can be received. Okay, handicap committee responsibilities. All right, so we have this December 7th seminar, and we're starting to identify some people that we have a bigger role in this than we used to from an AGA standpoint. All right, strongly recommended handicap conducts a handicap review at least once per year for all players for which it is responsible. So now they've told you got to meet once a year. World Handicap compliant technology should provide reports to assist handicap committees identify those players requiring handicap review. A player can request a handicap review if they believe their handicap index no longer reflects their demonstrated ability. So obviously they've got to be able to have a review and appeal process to that. Okay, so this is kind of what I showed you last year from a handicap index quality score. All these kind of things may or may not be built into when those scores are entered. So frequency of post. Are they posting every Tuesday like they're supposed to? They don't post on Tuesday. They ramp a bunch of scores in on Wednesday night. They put them in for the week. They put them in for the month. They start to do it inconsistently. You start to see a program before they have a tournament score or a member guest. All those kind of things can be in there. The probability of a score table would be incorporated. That what day of the week are they? Like I said, they're always playing. Are they posting around when those other individuals in their group play? You know, you've got a group of 12 guys that play, and they walk in and post at their kiosk, or they post on their mobile app, and one guy that you always have a problem with posts at 10 o'clock at night because he wants to study it before he puts in whatever he should put in. Geofencing. Was their phone on the property? That's a big possibility for us. All right. There's all kinds of integrations with point of sales, 4Ts and whatever, and then who posted the score. You know, if club staff posted the score, that's clearly going to have a higher barometer than if they posted it themselves. You know, the handicap committee can adjust a player's handicap index to ensure that it reflects their demonstrated ability. In doing so, the handicap committee should consider all available information relating to the player's demonstrated ability, including the player's score potential, any handicaps previously held by the player, and whether the player is an improver, a steady player, or a declining player. Clearly, you've got a brand new golfer. Systems don't necessarily follow their skill set very well. The handicap committee should consult with and have ratified the player's handicap adjustments by the Allied Golf Association. All right. If a player fails to submit a score from an authorized format of play, the handicap committee should investigate and take appropriate action. If a score was valid, an acceptable score, still discoverable, that score should be posted. So if they forgot to post their score from the member guest because it was too good and you didn't do it for them, that score needs to be posted. Okay? If the score is not discoverable, a penalty score may be posted. In most serious cases, such as repeat failures, the committee has the discretion to apply additional penalty scores, reset the player's handicap index, or consider other disciplinary actions. So to make this better for all of us, we post as many scores as we can through whatever tournament program that you're using. Most of you, if not all of you, will use Golf Genius, going into 2020. Okay, this is new. Clearly, there's a little bit more of a lift from a committee standpoint. So, the committee in charge of the competition, which is not necessarily your handicap committee, and frankly, probably shouldn't see, we're already asking you to essentially expand a little bit. So think about volunteers and really work on getting more people involved in your organization. All right, so when you get to your tournament competition, maximum handicap index for entry, what they're permitted to use, course handicap, playing handicap, this is key. What is your handicap revision date going to be for your events? So the reason you brought the scorecards is twofold. One is your golf association has the responsibility of adjudicating whole par. All right? Now remember, par is part of our course handicap calculation now. So think about the forward set of tees, and the people who are playing those forward set of tees. From our standpoint, they're asking us to take this recommended length and it actually defaults into our system that way. We believe we're actually getting access to it today. I think that we are leaning towards maintaining the par for the forward set of tees by default that your standard set of tees is. Stroke handicap allocation, the old handicap hole allocations. The rules of handicapping will recommend using course rating data to rank the holes for stroke index allocation. The recommendation is to allocate odd strokes on the front and even strokes on the back. Specific strokes will be allocated using 3-hole clusters with 1 and 2 stroke holes in the middle of the cluster. So what they're recommending is that our facilities essentially move over to this stroke index allocation component because, frankly, the data is better than a sample of what you could essentially put together.